Good morning and welcome. My name is Paul Alpert and I am the chair of the Needham Planning Board. This open meeting of the Needham Planning Board on Monday, April 25th, 2022 at 9:05 a.m. is being conducted remotely consistent with current state regulations and is being recorded. Public access to this meeting does not ensure that there will be public participation unless required by law. This meeting will not have public comment except in connection with any hearing that is on the agenda. There is no hearing on the agenda this morning. First, we'll confirm that a quorum of the members of the planning board are present. When I call your name, please respond that you are present. Artie Crocker.
Here.
Adam Block.
Present.
Jean McKnight.
Present.
Natasha Espada.
Present.
All 5 members of the planning board are present. Next, I'll introduce the planning department and staff. The planning department, Lee Newman, our planning director.
Present.
And Alexandra Klee, our assistant planning director.
Present.
Thank you. As each agenda item is reached, I will introduce participants who are here to present or discuss projects and proposals. For those participating in the meeting, please also be aware that others may be able to see you and hear you. Anything that you share or state will be a matter of public record. All supporting materials for this meeting, including the agenda, are available on the town's website, www.needhamma.gov, unless otherwise noted. The ground rules for this meeting are designed to allow for an accurate public record. Each of the speakers on our agenda will be introduced. After speakers conclude their remarks, each board member will be asked by name for any comment, questions, or motions. All votes will be by roll call. For each participant, please remember to state your name for the record before speaking. For each person from the public who is recognized to speak, please remember to state your name and address for the record before speaking. That concludes our preliminary remarks. The first item on our agenda this morning is a continued discussion of the decision regarding the amendment to major project site plan special permit number 2005-07. Carbon Health Medical Group of Florida and Needham Gateway LLC, the petitioners, for the property located at 100 and 120 Highland Avenue, Needham, regarding request for new principal use at the property described as a medical professional office providing primary and walk-in medical care. We have already voted the relief and we have previously started to discuss this decision. A revised decision has been circulated by our staff. And yesterday we got further redlined comments from the petitioner's attorney, Rick Mann. Alex, is Attorney Mann in attendance?
Yes.
Would you bring him over, please?
Sure thing.
Thank you. Hello, Rick.
Good. How are you all?
Good. Good morning. I brought you over because you have presented us with additional comments to the draft that was circulated on Friday. And so we need to answer your requests, I suppose. I will start by saying that I was fine with the draft that was circulated on Friday. Mr. Mann has made further redlined suggestions. So I will ask the planning board members, other than Artie, who was not here for the hearing. He's welcome to be here, but he will not be voting on the decision. Whether you have had an opportunity to review the draft and Mr. Mann's further suggested changes.
I have not had a chance to review Mr. Mann's additional comments.
Okay, then we'll go through them after.
Neither have I, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Jean?
Yes, I did go through his comments. I also had previously gone through the decision and found, just a few minor changes. So those minor changes we could keep till the end when all the substantive issues have been discussed, or I can present them now, whatever you want.
So before we get to Mr. Mann's red line comments, Adam and Natasha, did you have any comments on the draft as presented on Friday? Circulated by Lee Newman.
I had no further comments.
Natasha, are you okay?
Neither do I. Yeah, I'm okay.
All right. Then
Paul, I don't have just a couple of minor. Do you mind if I have a little minor thing? A little very minor, Paul. The only thing I 1 second. One thing I question is on 3.14, it talks about after hours of illuminating of the sign on the parking side of the building, and it has to be turned off. It basically says if building controlled by Carbon Health should be turned off. The question I have is, it makes it, that type of thing makes it very easy for a lighting system not to be controlled by a tenant. And then obviously they say, well, we can't do anything about it. Why does it have to be controlled by the tenant? Why should it not just simply be turned off?
Because this amendment speaks to what's going on in the Carbon Health facility, and Mr. Moskowitz presumably has control over the other lights. And we can ask.
They may be, if I could interject, Paul, you said it correctly, but I think that it's possible and probable that the original decision already covers this issue vis-a-vis.
That's where I was going.
Okay.
Yeah. The lights that aren't controlled by Carbon Health are probably covered by the original decision, and Lee can check on that. Yes, Natasha.
I just have a question about, will the site plan that was presented be part of this amendment? Is it just basically the change, the amendment to decision, or because it describes all the things that are happening in the site plan for the dumpsters, will that be an attachment to it, or?
No, the site plan for the attachment was already approved.
There's a base.
Go ahead,
Natasha, there's a base site plan approval, which stays in effect.
So that's separate from this. It's not included.
That's correct. That sits by itself. This sits on top of that.
Okay. And then my other question was, how do we create accountability for making sure that there are only 2 professionals in the building when there are 7 spots? We can't do that. That's not part of our purview.
We haven't generally required reporting. I mean, I think as a practical matter, when a problem happens, that's when we kind of investigate. That's been our historical practice. We haven't generally required any kind of reporting or timesheets to be provided to us or monitor things at that level.
That's okay. I'm just trying to figure out, like, you have 7 rooms and you only have 2 professionals in there. What are the chances that there's going to be more people, there's going to be more parking, there's going to be more things, and how do we ensure that it's really abiding by the 2 professional rule?
I think we have that problem with all of our decisions, with a lot of conditions that we have. And all I can say is, when somebody complains to us or to the building commissioner that something's going on, then we ask the building commissioner to investigate.
Okay.
And that's all we can do. Yes, Jean.
And I think we have one numerical limit that is that we have a provision for checking. That is, if I recall it correctly, no more than 40 patients a day. And if
I'm not sure. We're going to discuss that because Mr. Mann requested that come out. And
I understand that, but I didn't want to ignore
you do have a provision. You do have a provision in there somewhere in the conditions that allows you to deal with any defaults, if you will, or breaches.
Yeah.
So, and we haven't objected to that language. We have objected, obviously, to the substantive condition. If I could just make one quick remark before you proceed on the substance. Just to be clear, the changes that I made here are not new. These are the same changes that I had in my original revision. Right. I got the draft Friday afternoon, like everybody else did. I had it circulated to some 6 different people on my end. So I got it back to you as quickly as I could. We have a fundamental disagreement relative to how the parking waiver should work. I've laid out my analysis. I believe I'm correct, that I'm not giving up my waiver. I am eating into my waiver, and that we are definitely going to have to come back to you as a practical matter to fill up the other building, because we are going to be short. Even if we're just retail for retail, we're going to be short 6 spaces that we're eating up, if you will, by virtue of this. I think it's correct. I think it's fair. We're not going to be giving up our waiver here just to put in a 3,200 square foot a tenant. That isn't.
Just, I apologize, Rick, but Mr. Chair, should we start our conversation about the specific changes in order? I fear that we may, I understand that the substance, Rick, that you're talking about, but I think that we may just want to take it in order.
It's fine with me. I just wanted to make the point that my points are not new. They're the same.
No, we understand that your points were there in the prior draft, and we didn't get a chance to discuss it yet, and that's why we're here today.
That's all I was saying.
Okay. So in order, on page 3 at section 1.5, Mr. Mann points out what are basically typos, adding the letter S at 2 places to make it plural, which seems appropriate to me.
Yes, I agree.
Okay. Well, then we get to the issue. So we get to section 1.8 and 1.9 because they come in together.
I think 110, if you, Mr. Chair, 110 also.
And 110 also. Okay. They all come in together. Thank you, Mr. Mann. First of all, at the top of the second paragraph of 1.8, the petitioner has requested a special permit to waive strict adherence to enable the proposed new use rather than full occupancy. I have no objection to that change.
I agree.
Okay, thank you. So then we get to the issue about the parking spaces. Rick, I thought we had made it clear during the hearing that any use of what, let's call it the Webb building, 100 Highland Avenue, was going to require you to come back to us because your expert came to us with a parking study that showed that at peak, potentially at peak hours, there was going to be very little room. There was, you know, your expert study showed, I think nine spaces, potentially only 9 spaces available in what they calculated to be the peak hour. And you're asking that if you have a tenant who, based on the requirements, will require fewer than 25 spaces, then you don't even need to come to us. If it's a use as of right, the parking waiver, they have 25 spaces, yet we have a parking study that shows that at peak hours, your parking study that shows that at peak hours, there could only be 9 spaces in the parking lot. We said, you've got to come back to us at that point when you've got somebody, anyone for the Webb building. And so it makes sense to us to leave it drafted the way we had drafted it, so that anytime I know you're saying as a practical matter, you're going to have to, well, if you agree that as a practical matter, you're going to have to, then let's leave it that as a legal matter, you're going to have to.
If I can respond, please, Paul.
Yes, go ahead.
Originally, when the shopping center was approved, there was a recognition that there would be short parking in terms of the required parking. There was a waiver granted. It was for 30 spaces, 127 versus 97 provided. If Carbon Health were a retail user, would we be having this discussion, or would you be simply saying, we didn't have to come back to you for any relief whatsoever?
We'd probably still be talking about parking waivers.
Yeah.
Why?
For retail use, you'd probably be requiring, I don't know, Rick. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know what retail use should have. But your study showed that there's a parking deficiency here, and we're dealing with 2nd Avenue, which does not have parking available on the street. We're dealing with neighbors who complain that people park on their residential street and walk over to this shopping center. And I know your client denies that, but we do have neighbors who complain about it. And we as a planning board have to be concerned about all this.
Paul, I'm not asking you that. That isn't the point that I'm making. The point I'm making is that there was, and I would ask Lee to chime in on this as well, because she was there. She's the only one of us who was there. When the waiver was granted, it was granted based on a presumption, because there was no other presumption to be made at that point, that the entire 22,000, 23,000 square feet would be retail and one restaurant. Therefore, they asked for a waiver and they got the waiver. If they came back in as they did for retail, there wouldn't have been, and there was not a requirement for an additional waiver.
But Rick, we now have years of practical experience.
That isn't what that isn't, I don't want to get argumentative, but that is not what the legal issue is here. The legal issue is that we got a waiver. We haven't waived our waiver. You'll forgive.
The legal issue is, Rick, that you're in front of us on a special permit application, which allows us to revisit this issue.
Not sure that I agree with you on that matter, but you are in a position of control, and I can only make my argument to you. Yeah. I think that my argument is legally correct. I don't want to be giving up any rights that I might have by virtue of this decision. And I'm happy to do something more benign that leaves the issue open for another day, but I don't think it's fair to put me in a position where we're going to have to waive our rights that we had. Let me just make one more comment, Adam, if I could, just before you make your comment, if I could. In effect, my client was told by the planning board back in 2006, you can have 23,000 square feet of retail use, and you can have this 4,800 square foot restaurant based upon this waiver. And now, a number of years later, he's lost his tenant. He's had to come back in, has a slightly different type of tenant going into the space that we're discussing today. And as a result, it's going to be put in a position of tremendous vulnerability. It is not fair to the owner of this property.
So
I'm sorry, Adam.
Rick, I understand what you're saying. However, I think what we're dealing with is it's not the same use, number one. And number two, the traffic study highlighted a new problem, which was not contemplated in 2006. So we have to deal with both of those issues at present. And your client certainly has to go through the process in the market of finding a tenant to fill that space. And to the extent that type of use requires a new or parking study, the planning board is obligated to deal with the new information at that time, which is what we're dealing with. And so that's why it's constructed in this way. I understand your advocacy, and I understand you see it as, I think, a diminution of your client's rights. Nevertheless, your client is choosing to accept a tenant that and has gone through the process of embarking on a new parking study, which has revealed information different than 2006. So we're obligated to deal with this nevertheless. And it is and remains a special permit.
Jean, do you have any comments?
I agree with the comments made by you, Paul. And also, I know that the comments that and changes that McMahon asked for had been reviewed by our planning director, and in the draft that was presented to us on, I think, Friday, the changes that he had previously sought were not made. So I assume that the advice of our planning staff is to have the decision the way it was drafted. And then I agree with the comments. I won't repeat them that our chair, Paul Alpert, made.
Natasha, do you have any comments?
No, I agree with Jean and with what Adam said and what you said, Mr. Chair.
And I won't go any further on this. Rick, I don't think you have the votes, even if
you have to do what you have to do. I understand.
Okay, so we want to leave, except for the change at the beginning of the second paragraph of 1.8. All the other changes that Mr. Mann is requesting will not be made, and sections 1.8, 1.9, and 1.10 will remain as drafted as of Friday. Yes, Jean.
There are further changes that Mr. Mann suggested in the document that may be appropriate to make essentially.
We're going to go through
of the type that was just approved about adding the S and that sort of thing.
Mr. Chairman, could I just comment on what you just said relative to section 110? And could you give me just one moment, please, to just review that language?
Sure. It's also in section 1.11, Rick. It continues into there on page 5.
I see that. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Artie.
Just a quick question. At what point does a meeting start to get into an open meeting again? As far as when there's comments going on and
when we're making substantive decisions about our initial decision, all we're doing right now is reviewing the drafting of the written decision to make sure that it complies with the evidence that was presented at the hearing. And that was made.
This is an open meeting. Anybody can hear what we're saying, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, this is an open meeting.
Well,
but when does it?
I mean, I guess I'm referring to
let Artie speak. Let Artie speak.
Yeah, no, just at what point does it become a meeting where the public can comment if the petitioners are commenting? That's all. I understand it's legal. Anyway, I understand some aspects of it, but
the public hearing closed. The public hearing, which is when we debated the overall relief and the application itself, and the decision. That's the opportunity during that public hearing. We close the process is we then close the public hearing once all the evidence and testimony, including public comment, has been given. And after that time, it's up to the board to vote on two things. The first thing is the relief, and the second thing is the decision. And during both of those votes, it's not a public hearing, so there is no public participation in that process.
I understand.
I'm going to modify what Adam just said, Artie, that at a public hearing, the public has a right to speak. At a meeting like this, that's not a public hearing, although the public doesn't have a right to speak, the chair has the discretion to recognize somebody who is in attendance who wishes to speak. And so if someone who was in attendance raises their hand, I have the discretion to allow that person to speak.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. I think hopefully you understand why I'm raising the question, because to some degree, when it starts to become so much more, enough comments going back before the planning board and the petitioners, it starts to be looking like a public hearing again. It's, if it acts like a duck and sounds like a duck, it's a duck at some point. So just wanted to raise that, because I understand why there's the legality of it, making sure that the words, the legal terms being used and how it's being drafted needs to be correct. But at some point when there's petitioning going on to change something, it starts to be a public hearing again.
I hear what you're saying.
Thank you, Paul.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to make one request. If you could see a way clear as a board to making the change. I don't know why. I don't know why you necessarily require in 110 and 111 the acknowledgement to be such as it is. You've made your decision. The decision provides a singular space waiver. Why are you putting me in a position where I have to acknowledge that I have to be coming to you with my hat and my head in my hand with the guillotine prepared? It just doesn't seem fair. And I'm just going to make that point and let you make your decision.
Well, I think my recollection is that we discussed it at the public hearing, and that's what we said, was that when you had a tenant for the web building, you were going to have to come back.
I said most assuredly we would be back before you, and that is in fact the case.
Well, no, and
that's different.
You're not agreeing to anything here. This is our decision.
I think I am. I think you're saying the petitioner has acknowledged that. Yeah, I think I am. I think I am. I don't think that's necessary. I really don't. And I don't think it's appropriate.
I am willing to take out the phrase "the petitioner has acknowledged that."
I appreciate that, and I think I'm not sure that that same change is needed in 111.
Paul, clarification. Are you taking out the entire sentence about the petitioner has acknowledged, that entire sentence?
In section 110?
Yes. Because these are findings, these are findings and conclusions, not conditions. So.
Okay, I'm fine with that. We can take out the whole.
Take out the whole.
Natasha and Adam, are you okay with it? Yes, Lee.
Why would you take out the whole sentence? Why wouldn't you just say that the building shall remain untenanted and that a further parking study should be submitted? Why wouldn't you just leave the conclusion in and get rid of just the acknowledgement component?
So that's like a finding that we're making.
Yeah, it's a finding. The building's going to stay empty, and he's going to give us a parking study when he's ready to have it reoccupied in a waiver issue.
Except if the petitioner finds a tenant that doesn't increase the parking at all, are they required to come back for a special permit?
Yes, anything that happens in that building triggers a special permit because there's no waiver at all for the occupancy of the building.
I don't necessarily agree with that, and I don't think we have to debate that point, Adam. I think your point is very well taken, and I appreciate it. I don't have any problem with you saying it is the board's feeling or something like that we have to come back. I don't object to that. I just object to you putting words in my mouth and my client's mouth.
No, I appreciate that, Rick, and I think we're agreeing with that.
So I think we could just say the former Frank Webb building located at this address shall remain empty and untenanted until further planning board approval is obtained following submittal of a further a further parking waiver request, and an updated parking study demonstrating an adequate supply at the shopping center.
And to Adam's point, if required, and that's appropriate, if required. And it's more likely than not going to be required. But again, Adam made the point, I think, very well, and I agree with it.
Lee, what is the circumstance? Why, let me rephrase, why if the petitioner has a tenant that actually produces zero parking?
Well, there's never going to be a use that produces zero parking. Every use in the zoning bylaw that goes into a space has a required parking calculation associated with it. And it's just a question of what the required parking is. And but he has basically zero capacity. So any use that goes in there is going to have a parking requirement associated with it. So it's just a question of the extent of the parking that's required for the proposed use and a demonstration that the use works on the site, given the mix of uses that are proposed that are currently operating there and their various peak demands.
Is parking the only reason that causes the applicant to come?
It would depend on his proposed use. If he's going in with a use that's already, if he goes in with a retail use or some consumer service uses there, those uses are allowed by right, but he can't exercise them until he demonstrates that the parking works. If he has a special permit use, if he has a special permit use, then he's got a special permit for the use and he's got a parking waiver.
And if I may add,
as of right,
pardon me?
If he has a use as of right?
If he has a use as of right, he needs a parking waiver. That's what you've done here, because he has zero capacity for any other uses to go in there because he doesn't have parking waivers to substantiate them.
And Mr. Chair, that is precisely why I advocate as vigorously as I possibly can against what you're doing here. You're putting my client in a position that it is not fair. You're reducing his waiver to zero and putting him at the whim. You'll pardon the expression because I know you'll be judicious, but nonetheless, I'm at the mercy of the board. That isn't how he went in here in 2006. I don't want to rehash it. You made your decision, but that's precisely the position I should not be in.
And we're 16 years later from 2006, Rick. And we've got a in front of us with additional parking waivers. And we've got 16 years of experience here, and this is where the board is. I'm comfortable with taking out the entire sentence. I don't think it's even necessary to put it in the findings because, as you said, it's a finding. We've used up the parking waiver basically. Jean, did you have your hand raised again?
I was only going to respond to Mr. Block's comment to say that there's no formal process for this board to determine whether the further parking study is adequate, et cetera, other than an amendment to the parking waiver that would be sought.
Which is governed, which Jean, I think you're saying is governed by the underlying special permit.
Yes, and before deleting the entire sentence, I was just looking at the conditions. Do we clearly have that in the conditions about the need for further parking waiver at the occupancy?
Section 3.16, I believe, is the attempt to do that.
Oh, okay. So as long as we have it in the conditions, then I'd go along with deleting the entire sentence.
I have a comment or two in that section, but that's fine.
Let's take the sentence out at 1.10.
Okay.
And in 1.11, Rick, you had requested at the beginning of 1.8 that we change full occupancy to the proposed new use. So I'm looking at the top of page 5 in 1.11. I think you'd want to make us the same.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, thank you.
What are we talking about changing?
I'm looking for it again. Where did I see it? Parking.
Number 3 under 111.
The former Franklin. I saw something here about full occupancy of the.
Yes, I think the phrase currently reads, the former Frank Webb Center, this is in section 111 under subsection paragraph 3. It currently reads, the former Frank Webb's Bass Center building at 100 Highland Avenue remains empty and untenanted until further planning board approval is obtained as set forth in sections 1.9 and 110. And Rick wants to change it so that it reads, the former Frank Webb Bass Center building at 100 Highland Avenue is currently empty and untenanted.
That again, we're talking about assumptions that were made in the parking study.
Yeah.
That has nothing to, you know what I'm saying? It's
which number is that again, Lee? Which number?
It's in paragraph 111, and it's in within that there are 3 sections, and it's in section 3.
Okay.
Again, these are just
since this is reciting what was in the parking study. If what we have written is not correct with regard to the parking study assumptions, then making the change is appropriate.
Thank you.
I think we can all acknowledge that in the future, we're all going to look at this and see what's going on with the parking situations and the tenants in the building. The fact remains is that the tenants in the building have changed, the parking needs have changed, and what's going to happen in the future. I mean, we're all going to take a close look at this in the future. And obviously, we do not want to have a negative impact on what's going on in the neighborhoods around the corner, but we're all going to take a look at this and what tenants and how the tenants may change. And the fact remains is that the tenant change that has occurred at this point, as opposed to an Omaha steak place or something like that, is maybe the math says something different. But you know, when I look at it, I say it's increased the traffic. It's going to increase the traffic, and so the fact remains is everything's changing. Everything's in flux there, and what happens in the future, we take it at that point in time, and we analyze it at that point in time. I don't see the issue.
Yeah, and every time that there's a new tenant to be for this parking waiver, we actually review it, right? Or is it?
Yes.
Yes.
We get to,
yeah. So
yeah,
okay.
we get to look at it. I don't see the issue.
So will we make the requested change to subsection 3 of 111?
Which is to say, more specifically, to strike the words until further planning board approval is obtained as set forth in sections 1.9 and 110 above.
Yeah, we're just making the finding that the parking study takes into account that the former Frank Webb's Bath Center building at 100 Highland Avenue is currently.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, okay, and so we change the word remains to is currently
Correct.
empty.
Correct.
Exactly as proposed by Mr. Mann.
Yes.
Okay.
In section 1.15, changing building located at 120 Highland Avenue to shopping center, which includes 100.
There are no changes to the parking area.
Yeah, I think your change is fine. Does anybody else have a comment?
I'm sorry, I was making a note.
Oh, okay.
One section. What section?
1.15.
Well, I think that he's changed it to shopping center. I wrote it so that we were making the finding that there was adequate parking on the site to accommodate the uses in the building at 120. Not the combination of the uses at 120 and 100.
Except that 100 is vacant, and that's why we're allowing it now.
Okay, fine.
Mr. Chair, very minor thing. The very first paragraph in 1.8, and it's maybe it's my not understanding of terminology and planning board things. It says, with the installation of a dumpster on one parking spaces, should the S be eliminated in one parking space? Yeah, very minor thing.
Yes, thank you.
Where were you, Artie? I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
On first paragraph of 1.8, second sentence, with the installation of a dumpster on one parking spaces, just take off the
got it. Thank you.
I feel as though I should object to that only.
I know, Rick, I know you should. I know you're going to.
Good for you, Artie. Don't you know that's my job?
Yes, I know that's your job. And that's the only reason I'm holding my head high today.
But I missed that one. So good for you. All right.
Okay.
Okay, so what are we doing on 115?
We're okay with it.
We're okay with
already approved uses of the shopping center.
Yeah. Rick, in the decision, I'm reluctant to make any changes because we've already voted it. We voted it when Marty was here. We voted the language. So, if you know, thank you. So now we get to the conditions. I think the first change is in 3.9. I'll give everybody a second to get there on page 7. I've got no problem with adding the word working. You can have a staff who doesn't leave the premises and wants to socialize for a half hour before they leave. That's fine.
Yeah, I thought working. Yeah, I thought that change was harmless. Yeah, and
right.
You know, there could be a supervisory person who comes in to check the records or whatever. Yeah.
I'm okay with it as well.
And then
also in that paragraph, the change to with the adding S's after assistant and practitioner, as we agreed to before. Okay.
So 3.10 and 3.11. Lee, I thought we discussed at the chair vice chair meeting that there wasn't any representation at the hearing about maximum number of patients per day.
We discussed it. You're right. I went back and I checked what we had done for clinics and other uses of this type. And we have historically received from the applicant a representation as to how many patients they're going to see per day. And we have historically included a condition in our decisions. And I just wanted to have that conversation with the board before a decision got made, just to universally delete it, because we have universally been told how many patients are going to be seen there with a maximum number. So they tell us what their load's going to be, and we generally quantify it in a decision. So,
well,
that's been our practice.
Right, but my recollection of our hearing is that we didn't discuss it.
Well, the doctor represented, although I think he was talking about
that is not a fair characterization.
No, Rick, I'm agreeing with you.
I knew you were. That's why I didn't go on.
The doctor did not make a representation.
He said on average he would have 20. So
no, he said on the average they're finding it as at their other facilities. That's
not
correct. A representation.
Okay.
He was answering somebody's question with the facts as best as he could present them, and currently no. Yes, Jean.
But if we don't have this condition, and we didn't say at the beginning that it was any kind of representation, it's simply our condition. If we don't have this condition, then we have no fixed condition that we can use to control.
But we have a condition. But we have a condition as to how many rooms there are available. We have I believe we have a condition as to how many patients can be in there at any one time. I don't know how having a condition as to the maximum number per day does us any good.
But in section 3.7, we have the sentence, if a complaint is registered with the building commissioner shall request that Carbon Health submit a certified census of the number of patients in the premises at a designated time. And Carbon Health shall return the results of the census within a reasonable time. So although I do see that it says the number of patients in the prison premises at a designated time, the only, to say that the use is in violation of the requirement would have to have a certain number that they cannot exceed. So
forgive me, but that assumes the validity and propriety of the cap in the first place. If the cap is removed, there really isn't any reason to have that language in there. I don't object to leaving it there because there is some basis for it, because it speaks about the number of seats that you can have in the waiting room, which by the way, yes, it shows on our plan as 4. I will point out to you that Carewell has 18 in their waiting room, but we're not arguing the point. We're only going to have 4. Anyway, it begs the question. The question is it proper to have a cap on the number of patients? It was not something that was represented, and it's something which, quite candidly, the tenant is not going to agree to. So there won't be a tenant. I mean, I hate to say it that way, but that's the reality.
When we were reviewing the orthodontist office downtown, did we have a cap on the number of patients that would come in, or did we have a cap on the number of rooms and people that were professionals that were working there?
I don't know without going back and look at it. I can go pull it up. I'll come back to you, Natasha. Let me just,
because I felt like that was one where we had something where we were concerned about the amount of people in the parking. It was very similar.
I'm not sure we can do that though without opening the hearing to actually get a representation.
The decision I modeled this after was the clinic that's operating on Highland Avenue, which is comparable to this, which has the condition of 40. And the medical clinic that was authorized across from Town Hall, there was a condition on number of patients per day. I'll go back and look at the orthodontist. I need to just get into Citrix. It will take me a minute.
If I could just comment on that point, because I think it's an important one in terms of the looking at Carewell in particular. The Carewell Center has over 31,000 square feet of commercial space, plus an additional 11,000 square feet of storage, which requires parking. It's over 40,000 square feet. We've got 22,000 square feet in our entire shopping center, no basement space whatsoever. We have 96 parking spaces on site compared to their having 113 on site and 10 in the public, or 11, in the public, which are used by every other facility in Avery Square.
Okay.
I mean, it is not comparable, and it's not.
Rick, I'm going to agree. I'm going to agree with Adam that I don't think we can put this condition here without reopening the hearing, because this is something that was not discussed at the open hearing. Perhaps it should have been, but it wasn't. We have a condition that there's a limit to no more than 7 exam rooms. We have a condition that limits the seats in the waiting room to 4 seats. And we have a floor plan for the waiting room.
And we also have a maximum
maybe there might be people who are standing in the waiting room, but there's only so much capacity that this space has.
That's right.
I don't feel it's necessary to have that 40 per day where with a maximum of 7 exam rooms. And I think it's pretty clear that they're only going to have 1 patient in each exam room at a time. There are privacy laws.
It becomes something other than an urgent care center in that case.
There is a further limit of the amount of patients that can be seen at one time, which I think is another element of control.
Yeah, I think it's there, but I don't remember where it is.
It's in 3.7.
Yeah, Mr.
37?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Artie.
So it was stated time and time again during these hearings that 20 patients a day, 20 patients a day, 20 patients a day. The math was, that's what
Artie.
Mr. Chair, I have to draw the line here. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's
Artie.
completely inappropriate.
It wasn't a representation. It was not a representation, Artie.
He just said that he was explaining at that time the average of another facility.
Yeah, I understand.
It was not a representation made of the limits of capacity here.
Excuse me.
I understand.
Excuse me. I have to take this call.
It was stated a number of
times.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to take a break.
Gene has to take a break
for Gene. For Gene, who has to take a call.
So we'll recess for 5 minutes.
We'll recess until Gene gets back. Unless you need a 5-minute break, Adam. We'll just give Jean however much time she needs on this call. I don't know whether it was before or after we turned on the recording, but Jean told us that she has a family member who there's a family situation that when this call came in, she was going to have to break to take the call.
Charlie.
And I'd really like to wrap this up by 10:30 if we possibly can.
Yes, I have a hard stop at 10:30, so that would be great. Thank you.
It's completely in violation of your rights. Okay. Yeah, that's it.
Rick, you still a town meeting member?
No, I live in Newton now.
You do?
Yeah, they don't look favorably upon outsiders remaining as town meeting members.
Oh, that's right. You mentioned that before. Now, why did you want to move back to Newton? I grew up in Newton. I have no desire to go back to Newton.
I won't take that personally. But we're living in an apartment. But my kids, my daughter, my son-in-law, and my grandchild are moving to Needham next week.
There you go.
And now that they're
our meeting.
Well, my grandchild is thinking about it. But we may end up coming back now that we know where they're going to be permanently. So.
Thank you, colleagues, for that accommodation. It was a great relief to get that call.
Everything good, Jean?
Everything is good. The social worker had said last Thursday that my brother might be released from the hospital today, and I know he's not ready. Yeah. So the doctor said, no, there's no such plan. Good. So it's a great relief.
Good.
And they didn't have a discharge plan for him anyway, so. Okay. Good.
So awesome. We're back.
Yes.
So I'm going to put in my 2 cents, and Jean and Natasha and Adam are free to disagree. Artie, not having been part of the hearing as a planning board member, I understand, Artie, the comments you wish to make, but please, we're trying to get this done in the next half hour. Where we did not discuss in the open meeting a maximum number of patients per day, and where, in my humble opinion, the requirements of sections 3.6 and 3.7, I think I don't think we need a maximum per day, because I just don't see where with the requirements in 3.6 of no more than 7 exam rooms and no more than 4 seats in the waiting area. And then if a complaint is registered, are getting a census. I think we're covered without having a daily maximum.
I agree with that, as long as we leave 3.7 as it is.
Yep.
I realize we don't have a numerical figure to say, oh, you're in violation. Wow. No, it would be an evaluation at that time based on what's reported. So I'm comfortable with that, and we'll take it out. We need to take it out of two places. It was redundant in the first place anyway. So it comes out of section 310 and 311.
In 311, any changes, revisions, or modifications to the floor plan shall require approval by the board. And Mr. Mann is requesting that we add language saying resulting in the addition of patient examination or treatment rooms. What we have is our usual language, Rick, and if it's a minor change, we would handle that with what's called a minor modification, which is a procedure that we use where you don't have to file a formal amendment. You don't have to give notice. I don't remember if the filing fee is reduced, but I think it is. If it's
there was no filing fee in that case.
What's that, Jean?
I thought that I did not think there was any filing fee in that case, but I may be wrong.
There's a $100 fee.
There's a $100 fee for minor modification.
Yeah, we don't care about the fee, but well, we do care about the fee, but not the principal issue is there may be truly minor things that don't even rise to the level of wasting your time. And fundamentally, because you just said it earlier, Paul, because everything is kind of driven by the number of treatment rooms, et cetera. That's why I focused on those. But if you can accommodate, great. I appreciate it. Not, we'll move on.
I'd like to leave our language because that's our usual language, and I don't want to start a precedent for something here. Also, of course, the waiting area. You're going to change the waiting area so that it winds up having, well, if you wind up having more seats, then you'd be in violation. But it's if it's minor, you come back to us, you talk to Lee, and
just to clarify, I misspoke on the fee. It's $250, not $100.
Oh, now we're talking.
I believe we're on record at $100
Mr. Mann said he didn't care, so no, just kidding.
Sometimes we waive the fee.
Natasha's
That's right. That's right. But sometimes we waive the fee.
It's recorded. It's recorded. No, I'm just kidding.
3.16.
3.16. I think after our discussion, we should not add your language in 3.16 in the middle.
But we are saying that the future occupancy shall require. Can we just say to the extent required by applicable law and this permit?
I don't think we can based on our previous discussion this morning.
I have made all my arguments.
Yeah, you have.
I'm argued out, and it's only 10:05. What am I going to do for the rest of the day?
One minor change.
Rick, do you have a 4-hour minimum with your client, Rick?
I have a minimum hours per day. Yes, I do.
Yes, Jean.
I see no harm in saying or uses at the end.
I don't either.
Yeah,
I think that's fine.
And by the way, there was no period at the end of that section 3.16. It needs a period.
Yep, thank you.
You're correct.
You're correct. We don't want to have a run-on sentence. So changing decision to amendment in 3.19B looks okay. Same with 3.20 in two places. Yes, Jane.
Mr. Chair, I had a more kind of precise way of doing that.
Okay.
Under B, change it to the petition shall have recorded with the Norfolk Registry of Deeds a certified copy of this decision granting this special permit, and then insert amendment under section 7.4 and site plan approval under section 7.2 and special permit amendment under section 5.1.1.5 of the bylaw. And that covers everything.
I have no objection to that, but I think the defined term amendment effectively picks all that up.
Well,
but I don't object. I don't object.
Okay, well, what do you think? I'm just trying to be accommodating here and precisely say what it is.
That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Lee, did you get all that wording, or do you want Jean to send you an email with it? Or
Jean, could you send me an email with it? I didn't get all your wording.
Sure.
And I can't wait for the tape.
It's basically taken a little bit of shorthand taken from the decision itself, the words of the decision.
Yeah, you and I can just close the loop on that.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, we can do it. We can do it right after the meeting. Yeah.
3.20, changing it to amendment. Any objection to that?
I would say subject to these special permit amendments and site plan approval, because there's two really, one for the parking. One for
and site plan approval. Okay.
Yeah. So and I'll send that to Lee. Just
okay.
Following up on 319. And the same thing, by the way, with 321. In addition to the provisions of these special permit amendments and site plan approval.
Okay. Is that okay with you, Rick?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just acknowledging the amendments.
Okay, I think we've gotten to the end.
I just want to note, because Gina sent me an email on something and I haven't had a chance to look at it. In terms of the exhibits, I want to grab the last parking study because there were two parking studies that were submitted. One included what was going to be the golf facility and the other didn't. I may have an incorrect reference in the exhibits, but the intent is to reference back to the study that only included this facility and not the golf.
Right.
So I'll correct that exhibit reference.
Jean, my recollection is that in the first draft, there was a duplicate reference. And so one of them came out.
Yes, but there were two traffic studies here. I think one is dated there
are two listed in exhibits.
One is dated March the 24th and one was dated November the 19th. I may have grabbed the wrong one for the exhibit. I'll go back and double check.
Mm-hmm. And then the question is also whether anything other than Exhibit 11 parking evaluation letter should be included in the, should be referred to as the project plan. So when you go back, check that. Would you like me, at this time, shall I go over just a couple of little edits? It'll
Adam has his hand raised. Gene, if we could.
Sure.
Sorry, Gene. So in 3.24, we talk about the ability to transfer over this special permit.
Yeah.
And it says to another party for substantially the same use as allowed hereunder. I would prefer to say this same use and strike substantially. I understand, Rick, that you may wish to.
I think we did strike substantially.
I don't think I didn't have any problem with.
We did strike substantially, Adam.
So what's funny is that it comes up in Lee's decision.
Where are we talking?
3.24.
3.24. I don't.
Adam, I don't know why. I think maybe somehow or other that my prior draft.
I think you're looking at a prior draft, Adam, because we took out.
It's funny. This was what was linked when I downloaded from
that's weird.
From the thing. From the
so
anyways.
What Lee drafted did not include that language, and it's fine with me anyway. And it covers your point.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking at
says the same use.
Yeah, okay. So I
as the use are covered.
That's odd technical glitch on the whole downloading of the Word thing, but Gene, I yield back to you.
Okay, Gene.
Okay. As you see, as I go through them, this is very minor points. In section 1.9, 1, 2, 3, 4, in the fifth line, it says the fast food use, namely, comma, Panera Bread. There should be a comma after Panera Bread, namely, comma, Panera Bread, comma. And just see. That was dealt with. Some of the things were dealt with in my little things were dealt with in our discussion. Section 3.7, in the second last line, the reference to the number of patients in the premises at a designated time, semicolon. That could either 3.7 on page
the waiting
7.
room. It begins
the waiting room. It begins the waiting room.
Yeah.
And in the second last line, after the phrase premises at a designated time, there's a semicolon. Now, you could have the semicolon and then eliminate the word and, or you could have a comma and.
Oh.
You wouldn't have a semicolon and. So
got it. Thank you.
One way or another. Okay.
I have no objection.
We dealt with the we dealt with other things. We dealt with the period. On 3.15, it says the carbon health shall share the same dumpsters. In other sections where we make reference to carbon health and so forth, we use the word facility. We say the carbon health facility. Okay. So I thought to be, consistent, I would say the carbon health facility.
Yeah.
Okay, and those other things we did. At the top of page 9, we refer to the building inspector, fire department, Department of Public Works, and this is complying with all requirements of our agencies and commissions. And so in that paragraph, we refer to the building inspector. In section 3.22, we refer to the building commissioner. Is it deliberate?
It's commissioner. I'll make the change. I didn't catch it.
Commissioner. And then in section 3.24, in 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth line, it says, after prior written notice to the board of such intended transfer and together with, the and is unnecessary. I mean, notice of intended transfer together with a written acknowledgement. Okay. You don't need and together.
Okay.
Okay, that's it for my little nits. Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, I move acceptance of the decision as discussed with the changes today and previously.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? I'll call the roll. Jean McKnight.
Aye.
Natasha Espada.
Aye.
Adam Block.
Aye.
The chair votes aye. You've approved the decision.
I want to thank you, all members of the board. I appreciate your indulgence and patience. And Lee and Alex, thank you very much. And Artie, welcome aboard.
Thanks, Rick. Appreciate it, dude. Have a good one.
Appreciate your advocacy as well, Rick.
Thank you.
So board members, I don't know if I was out last week, so I don't know who got a chance to sign the decision. Obviously, Artie, you're not doing it. And Jean, we're scheduled to meet on Tuesday for me to notarize your signature. So basically, Adam, Natasha, and Paul, if you haven't already, just sign the signature sheets, which are at the office.
Signed whatever pages were left at Marty's house.
I think.
No, you have to go to PSAB now.
So this is a PSAB?
What are the hours of what are the hours, Alex?
8:30 to 5.
Okay.
Yeah, if it works better eventually to find an alternative place so you don't have to go during the hours, but
PSAB is fine. Yeah, for me, but today's crazy. So
when are you meeting with Jean?
Tomorrow at 10. We just have to record it tomorrow.
We have to report it tomorrow. So I need to go to PSAB tomorrow morning.
I've made other plans in the afternoon, but I don't think it matters what time I sign.
I can notarize you first,
notarized.
or I can notarize anyone. It's just that you and I happen to make an appointment.
That's true. Yeah.
I think I've signed. I was there with coincidentally with Artie last week. And
okay, great.
Lee.
I have to sign. And then there was the warrant tonight. The warrant article at the warrant night. Are we still doing that? I just want to confirm.
No, I actually just emailed you.
Okay, thank you.
You're free.
And I know our agenda included minutes, but there were no minutes in the packet.
Right.
They are, I know, building up. We've got a lot of minutes. We'll have to take the time for them at some other meeting.
I need to catch up on last week's also.
And just a heads up, I'd hope to have actually the draft memo from GPI that I'm going to be sending on to the state on the MIPA review. I think I mentioned to you that the DPW is preparing some comments, and I'm going to have the comments from GPI, and Kate Fitzpatrick's going to be passing them on under her signature to MIPA so that we make the deadline of April the 28th.
Oh, I have one.
This was on the Highland Science Center project. I'm sorry, Jean.
Yeah, I have one piece of business that I want to request and be taken up at our next meeting. With regard to Hunting Road and the vote by town meeting that planning board would further study the proposed rezoning of the Hunting Road strip from SRA to SRB. I had asked Lee if our engineering department could do a study of that whole area. and the size of the lots and the frontage, and see what the actual potential is for any new lots. Well, we were discussing this at the zoning subgroup of the housing plan working group, and the zoning subgroup consists of Oscar Mertz, Ed Scheidler, and myself. And Oscar said that he'd take a look at it. And of course, he's an experienced architect, and he did. And what he reported just to me is that whether you took all the lots and just bought them all and refigured them, or put in 2 cul-de-sacs in 2 lots that happened to be side-by-side lots that were fairly large. And here you'd put a cul-de-sac, there you'd put a cul-de-sac, so you get 2 houses behind. The total potential additional lots is 4. So I thought if we had an opportunity to present that at our next meeting, we might be able to actually make a report. It wouldn't be to the first night of the annual town meeting, but it could be to the special town meeting on that. So I wonder if the planning board does want to go ahead with making such a report based on this study that would be presented to you.
Jean, I think we had voted this at the last meeting, and I was in the process of preparing just a brief outline of what you had voted that Kate was going to include in a package that she's distributing to town meeting members on Wednesday. And essentially what I was going to say in that was that the applicant had indicated really an interest in not proceeding with a re-subdivision of the land, but with just making a modification to perhaps to some dimensional requirements in the alternative, and that the planning board therefore was not going forward with an article presently or a study presently, but that would certainly be responsive to any alternatives that the applicant chose to submit. So that's what I was going to prepare for Kate. So if there's a change in plan here.
No, I think that's fine. Personally,
please I'm sorry, let's discuss that. Can we, the idea that we should take one little bit of town and put an overlay on it with a different frontage requirement, I really think that makes no sense. Our zoning bylaw is complicated enough as it is.
There's nothing in front of us right now.
Well, all I'm asking is, can we discuss this at our next meeting?
If we have time.
Well, then what do you want? Excuse me.
You got to remember something, Jean. Our next meeting is the day after town meeting, when we're all going to be at town meeting until 11 o'clock. Probably getting home between 11:30 and midnight. And then the next day we have town meeting again, again until 11 o'clock. We have a regular calendar on the 3rd. Let's see what time we have. I don't think it's necessary to be discussing this now, because the original applicant is saying they're not going forward. And that's all we have to report to town meeting. If we're going to do something in the future, even if we handle it in June or at the end of May, we get, if the housing committee wants to discuss this, fine, we'll discuss it. But let's not rush this for town meeting where I don't think it's necessary.
Well, of course, it wouldn't be rushing it to town meeting. It would be simply making a report to town meeting.
But you're making a report of something that the applicant is not asking us to report on.
All right. But what Lee said she was preparing was going to say that the planning board would not be studying this further. And I think that it would be a mistake to say that, because it is something the Housing Plan Working Group is likely to study and make part of its work. So and I don't want to imply otherwise.
We can modify. I think that's a valid point. I think, Lee, we could modify to say, and take out that part that says that we're not going to study it further.
It's fine. Yeah, that sounds more accurate.
Okay, that's fine. And I won't.
Okay, so then I'm going to basically just indicate, just let me get this straight in my own head, that they're not going forward. And the applicant may choose to come forward with an alternative, which the planning board would consider.
Yeah.
And just
Fine.
leave it there. Okay. Okay,
Yep.
fine.
Yes, Natasha.
So right now, we're so busy being reactive to all of these things that are coming in. But I think that in general, we should, as a group, really think about any initiatives that we want to take this year. And you know, besides the housing, just because it's just reminded me of it, to be proactive in how we want to address any planning issues in the town, including housing, which seems to be a pretty strong one.
I appreciate you bringing that up in particular, because when we switch over leadership, I'd like to make sure that at least quarterly, if not every 6 weeks, we have a dedicated planning board meeting that specifically relates the agenda is only dealing with planning issues. And it would be something, anything that dealing with, with planning on a proactive basis, either anything new or things like this, whatever the case may be. But I will be reaching out to everyone to talk about, goals that they see and priorities for planning that they see coming up.
Yes, Jean.
I think the only thing that there is some momentum on taking to the fall town meeting, even before the housing plan working group has come up with its plan, is changing the rules on the AD accessory dwelling units. But typically we don't put zoning articles on the fall town meeting warrant, and so even that might very well wait until the 2023 annual town meeting.
Jean,
that's the only thing I can think of that
we
really.
also have the breweries.
Forward with the brew pubs.
The brew pubs,
of course, the breweries.
The MBTA communities, just discussing that, I think, is important.
Agreed.
Yeah, did you see the article in the Globe?
Yeah, I just saw it yesterday.
Yeah.
No,
we weren't mentioned. I was glad of that.
Yeah.
I just think that we're doing a lot of really important work, and we're not, and we talked to Cindy about this with the housing group. We really need to say, look, these are the things that we're working on. This is kind of the future of other planning initiatives beyond just being reactive to developers and other projects and changes, because I think both of them are important, but I think that we really need to plan to be able to have a schedule for how we want to.
I think maybe we should set up a goal setting session for the group.
Agreed.
So that we can kind of figure out what the goals are going to be for the next year. And that's something we should create, I think, a special meeting only for that purpose. Agreed. And maybe we could do that. Maybe we could do that right after town meeting.
Yeah, one thing I haven't heard.
You have your hand raised.
One thing I haven't heard mentioned, and the public wants it. I think I know the public wants it, and that is, we haven't mentioned really anything about environmental concerns.
I was just going to get there, Artie.
That was the other one.
Say that I made a representation to town meeting last year, that the planning board would take that up, because Stephen Friel had proposed an amendment to the Muzzy zoning, and and we haven't done anything, and I feel that we should. I thought that there was. On the other hand, there is, I've been following what's been going on in Newton and Brookline, and the state law issues that what Newton and Brookline have been doing have raised, and it looks like the legislature is going to be passing something. So, well, they're looking at their version of a net zero stretch code or something to that effect, or pushing the stretch code even further. Right. And it certainly makes no sense. Now, we always have to be cognizant of what's going on with buildings and what they can do, what they can't do. But it makes no sense for us to be behind the curve when it comes to environmental concerns. We want to be, we need to be in front of the curve. If you look at it, seriously, folks, if we look at every town, almost every single town around us, even Framingham, if you look at what's going on, I'm actually surprised myself how far behind the curve Needham is. And I agree, Artie. There's no reason. There's no reason for that to happen. Yeah. So that's something that we really need to put on the front burner.
And I'm part of the group with Hank that Hank's leading on kind of environmental issues. So I can report on that. But I just have to tell you, I was on the Green Communities 10 years ago, and we had a committee of 25 people and we couldn't get anything through Needham. So we have to be really clear, have clarity on what it is that we're looking to do, to have input to make sure that we can get that through. The other piece that I wanted to bring up was Nuari. We said, okay, we'll kind of, we approve the mission and vision statement, but one of the things that Marty brought up is like, okay, so this is kind of kumbaya, but what are the next steps? So I'm going to start thinking about that too, about like, how that can be integrated into our planning.
Yes, and Natasha, like 10 or so years ago, when there was a proposal to introduce, let's say, the stretch code or having the meeting be part of it, there were a few things that were faulted. There were a few faults in the process of trying to bring it to town meeting. And that those could have been addressed. So a couple of things. One is those can be addressed now pretty easily, but also equally, even more importantly, the public is much more aware of the need for us to do something. So if we do it the right way with public process, public input, every step along the way, we can make something happen. There's no reason we cannot change things and move things forward a lot further than we are.
I agree.
On that point, Lee, I thought that there was another initiative in town that has already begun doing some work that I think
I'm on that group.
Been involved in. Well, so what?
Yeah, I'm on that group. It's with Hank is leading it. And I can't remember the exact name of it, but it's a
climate action.
Thank you, Artie, for remembering the group. But and so I think what I can do is I can update on that group at the next meeting.
Is Stephen Frail on that group?
Yes.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah,
maybe that's why he has
Marianne Cooley, and there's a large group of
a number of people from Green Needham are on that group.
Good.
Yes.
Michael Grice too.
Whether direct representatives of the group or the fact that they are coming by another means, but they are also on the group.
Jean is raising her hand and being very patient. Go ahead, Jean.
I just want to mention something else that has some momentum, and that is going forward with the tree bylaw. As you may recall, this planning board was working on a tree bylaw, and I think it was the select board that discouraged us from continuing our work on it. And it seems like—
Discouraging is being polite.
It seems like now that the select board is more behind it, and it's another thing to add to our list for action soon.
I would argue that, respectfully, politely argue that one group being, certainly if the select board was greatly discouraging it, to say the least, makes it harder for anything to pass town meeting. But obviously we know that many things have changed at this point. And although, Paul, I thought last meeting you had made it, you had indicated that it was in the select board's hands. I'm not sure if that was the correct phrasing. I think it is our responsibility to push something and make this happen.
It was the select board. This goes back to when I was first elected to the planning board, which is now 7 years ago. We were looking at working on a tree bylaw in the planning board. And Jean just said that the select board discouraged us. And I said that was being polite. My recollection is that the select board made it clear that it was their province and not our province.
Because it's a matter of the general bylaw and not the zoning bylaw.
That's what I was going to say.
Oh, yep. Okay. Well, I think we can. My belief is that we can work on something, and that the select board will be on.
Who's the chair of the select board now? Marianne?
I don't know who the new chair is going to be.
Marianne.
But
no, I'm sure they've already changed.
Marianne was the vice chair last year, so I think it's Marianne.
So maybe once we elect a new chair to the planning board, the chair of the planning board can consult with Marianne and push that along. Making no predictions as to who that might be, but it's not going to be me.
Well, it would be good. It would be good because, I mean, I can't tell you how many people want something to happen.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Cannot tell you. We want something to happen. It needs to.
I apologize. I have to jump off. I haven't.
You have to jump off, and I need to jump off too. So can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion, a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll take the roll. Artie Crocker.
Aye.
Jean McKnight.
Aye.
Natasha Spada.
Aye.
Adam Block.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We're adjourned.
Yeah, bye, gang. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.